Lesson 1, Unit 5, The Theory of Change. Some organizations develop a theory of change to help them identify potential projects. A theory of change is a representation of how and why a complex change process will succeed under specific circumstances. In order to achieve desired change, the theory of change identifies a series of various paths or causal pathways that connect the goal with the outcomes, preconditions, and assumptions. Each path can be a potential project that the organization might decide to address. Here's one of the definitions of a theory of change. A theory of change explains how a group of early and intermediate accomplishments sets the stage for producing long-range results. In summary, a theory of change is a description of how and why an initiative works, and it is supported by evidence of repeated interventions. A theory of change can be simple or very complex, depending on the conditions and the context. A complex intervention will create a theory of change that has many pathways of change. Each pathway represents a change process with assumptions and a clearly identified outcome. Each outcome in the pathway of change is tied to an intervention. This reveals the often complex web of activity that is required to bring about change. The basic elements of a theory of change are the long-term goal, long-term outcomes or intermediate outcomes, assumptions, indicators, and the interventions or implementation strategies. In some other publications, outcomes are also named as preconditions. The first element describes the ultimate goal. This is the vision of success. This is the desired change. The connection between outcomes and the goal describes the preconditions that must exist in order for the change to happen. This is the mapping process where the goal or impact is linked to the various long-term outcomes. These are the changes that need to happen in order to achieve the goal. These changes can occur in areas of behavior, attitudes, skills, relationship, policies. Labeling outcomes in different colors helps identify the different types of changes, for example, education, health, or nutrition. Additional intermediate outcomes. These form the outcome framework that leads to the long-term goal. This increases the detail of the map or framework. Depending on the complexity of the context, more outcomes may be needed to fully identify all the changes that are required. A connection between outcomes identifies preconditions. Remember that outcomes explain the change that occurs as a result of an intervention, and together they contribute towards the final goal. Assumptions identify the conditions required for an outcome or for a change to happen. Assumptions can exist at any level of the outcome framework, and assumptions are accepted as true or valid conditions that are certain to happen. Indicators are used to test the assumptions that underpin the relationships between the different levels of the theory of change. Indicators provide the evidence that a change has occurred. An indicator may be quantitative, like number of water systems, or qualitative, like the description of characteristics of a community. At the end, the interventions, either single activities or a whole program, define the actions that must be done in order to bring about the outcomes. Depending on the complexity of the outcome framework, there can be many potential interventions or projects for the organization. These are not detailed plans, but forms of interventions that will lead to desired change. The outcome framework helps reveal the logic of a theory of change, identifies any gaps, and helps in the decision to select an intervention, either a project or a program. The final product is an illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. It gives the big picture, including issues related to the environment or the context. It shows all the different pathways, it's the roadmap, that might lead to change. even if those pathways are not related to the project the organization has selected. As mentioned before, a theory of change can be large and complex, depending on the type of long-term selected. Once completed, the theory of change helps communicate this rationale to a wide variety of audiences, including the organization, the donors, beneficiaries, partners, and key stakeholders. It shows the level of complexity that for a specific change to occur and the various assumptions that are required for the change to happen.